Hi there, this is God and the world. Is God a narcissist? Sometimes we hear people making this accusation. In this short video, I would like to address this question. But first of all, a spoiler alert. No, God is not a narcissist. People who accuse God of narcissism do not know God and may even be projecting their own psychological inadequacies onto God. Although one may refute the charge of narcissism in a number of ways, I will only make 3 observations here. First of all, what is a narcissist? Narcissists are people who have an inflated view or opinion about their own self-importance. They think that the world revolves around themselves and demand admiration from others. They regard themselves as being superior to everyone and everything else. People who do not render them anticipated admiration are ostracized and cancelled. When we apply this definition of narcissism to the God of biblical revelation, it is immediately apparent that it would be absurd to think that God is a narcissist or that he has an inflated opinion about himself. Not only the Son, but also the whole universe owes their very existence to God. Nothing is greater and more magnificent than God. There is no higher majesty, power, glory, or perfection than God. And yet, despite the magnificence of his divine attributes, God does not go around forcing people to worship him and then withhold his grace when they don't. His sunshine or his rain. Secondly, God does not need the acknowledgement or worship of anyone. One of the key attributes of God, which historic Christianity has affirmed in its confessions, is that God is impassable. God is not affected by the actions of other beings or things. For example, when the people of Lystra worshipped Paul and Barnabas, Paul was deeply disturbed and corrected their ignorance by saying, "Sirs, why do you do these things? We also are men of like passions with you, and preach unto you that you should turn from these vanities unto the living God, who made heaven and earth, the sea, and all things that are therein." Acts chapter 14, verse 15. In the Greek, men of like passions is the word homoeopathes, which refers to creatures whose passions or emotions are affected by external circumstances, much like the gods of Greek polytheism. Instead, the God of the universe is not affected by any external force or action, but sits above the circle of the world. Isaiah chapter 40, verse 22. And in whom there is no variation or shadow of change. Malachi chapter 3, verse 6, and James chapter 1, verse 17. It means that God is totally sufficient within and of himself. The created order, including human beings, cannot add anything to God's power, glory, or greatness. Rather, everything in the universe derives its being and operations from God. Human beings, for example, depend on external forces to exist and external care to flourish. When people affirm and encourage us, we are happy. When people reject us, we are disturbed and sad. God does not experience any such emotions. God is impassible. He does not undergo any mood swings. The long and short of it is that God does not need any of our admiration or worship. Our worship of him does not add anything to his glory and self-sufficiency. Neither does our rejection of him detract anything from his glory and self-sufficiency. This, of course, does not mean that God does not have emotions. Briefly, by definition, according to his divine attributes, it is impossible for God to be a narcissist. Thirdly and finally, narcissists are not willing to suffer and to die for others. The most distinctive thing about God as revealed in the Bible is that God is love. 1 John chapter 4 verse 7. The cross of Jesus is the clearest display of God's character and love. God became a man to suffer and to die on behalf of those who reject and despise him. Ancient historians have often described death on the cross as the cruelest and most painful death a person may suffer. Whatever doubt or misgivings one may have, when we look to the cross, we cannot have any doubt that God is love. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have everlasting life. John chapter 3 verse 16. And greater love has no one than this, that one lay down his life for his friends. John chapter 15 verse 13. People who accuse God of narcissism do not know God and may even be projecting their own psychological inadequacies onto God. Why would anyone not want to respond with a grateful heart to God, who according to biblical revelation is all-powerful, all-good, all-wise, and yet he graciously and freely bestows everlasting life on all kinds of sinners who believe in the Lord Jesus Christ? Isn't the answer that they don't like such a God and that they themselves would rather like to be God? Isn't it that they think that they are better and wiser than God? Isn't the answer that they love themselves more than God? It appears that they are the real narcissists and not God. The conclusion of the matter is that God does not need us, but that we desperately need him. It is our greatest glory and happiness to know and to worship the true God of the universe.